Jeremy Corbyn weighed in on the vaccine mandate debate. This is really interesting to me. He, of course, was the leader of the Labour Party. He's no longer the leader anymore, but he's going to lay out here what he thinks is the left position on vaccine mandates.
Let me ask you about the votes that are coming. You're still an MP. Are you going to be voting to introduce COVID certification at large events?
I don't think it's a particularly good idea, and what I want to see is a process where we are asking people to recognise the severity and dangers of COVID, but you achieve far more in public health by cooperation and persuasion than you do by compulsion. And I'm worried about the direction of travel we're going to with COVID passports, and then the danger, which I see as quite serious, of compulsory vaccination of NHS staff. Testing is an appropriate way of doing things. I mean, you do a temperature check when people come in here. Most people do that kind of thing. That seems to me to be fair enough. I was in a care home on Friday. I went to a 100th birthday party of one of my constituents, and it was a very small party. It was socially distanced, etc. Don't worry. And everyone was asked to take a test before they went in. That seemed to me reasonable. It's a very vulnerable population.
You don't then think that when this vote happens later in the week, I think around vaccination, compulsory vaccination for NHS staff, strikes me that you're dead against that.
I am against compulsory vaccination. I think it's reasonable that staff should be tested. I think people ought to be vaccinated and take up the opportunity to do it. But once you go down the road of compulsion, what do you do with the people that refuse to take a vaccination? Do you then dismiss them from working in the NHS? They obviously work in the NHS because they love it, they believe it, and they support it. And you then go down a road of what? Criminalising people? This is a very dodgy road to go down.
Why do you think, and again you can say ask him, but why do you think then that Labour under Sir Keir Starmer are going to vote this through?
I think they believe that it is the responsible thing to do. I believe the responsible thing to do is to challenge this Prime Minister and his incompetence, and I believe the responsible thing to do is to persuade people of the need for caution to ensure the COVID doesn't spread.
If you were leading the Labour Party, you would definitely whip your MPs to vote against this. Because I remember, but I was sitting in number 10 at the time.
Indeed, you were. You must have loved every minute of it.
It was an interesting time. But you would get your MPs, get the party to vote against pretty much everything. That to you was opposition, right? That was how oppositions conduct themselves. They literally oppose everything the government suggests.
Well, you oppose things that you believe to be wrong. And actually quite a lot of stuff goes through Parliament unopposed, actually, as you know. But you oppose things you believe to be wrong. And I believe the government's handling of COVID has been appalling and incompetent beyond belief. And I do think they have to be challenged much more strongly. And the Prime Minister, never mind his personal behaviour with parties and all the rest of it, his incompetence over the handling of COVID is unbelievable.
I think he strikes the exact right balance here. Now, the response to this I'm seeing is interesting. There are people who are just portraying this as Jeremy Corbyn is against a vaccine mandate. That's not a fair summation of his position. He very clearly says, vaccine or test. So if you're not going to take the vaccine, okay, but it's totally reasonable that you be tested. That is literally the Biden position that a lot of the same people who are cheering on what Corbyn says here, they were slamming Biden for saying effectively the exact same thing. And they were acting like the Biden position was a vaccine mandate, full stop. No, a vaccine mandate is take the vaccine and you have no other option. Biden's position was take the vaccine or take a test. That's the exact same thing that Jeremy Corbyn is saying here. Now, to be fair, Jeremy Corbyn is saying this even in the context of working in a high-risk field, namely the NHS. That's their universal healthcare system. And I think Biden's position is if you work in a high-risk field, you should have to get vaccinated, full stop. But if you work in a non-high-risk field and it's a business of 100 employees or more, then it's vaccinate or test. But either way, the principle that we're talking about here is the same thing. Namely, that Jeremy Corbyn is clearly against a hard vaccine mandate, but he is in favor of giving people the choice, an option, a soft mandate. So it's either vaccinate or it's perfectly reasonable that you have to take a test if you don't want to vaccinate. So the reason why I love this clip is because that, other than the original Biden plan, this is honestly the first person I've seen in the discourse agree with what my position is. Because what's happening now on the left is very strange. You have some people who are just in favor of a hard vaccine mandate. And also, my hunch is the people who are in favor of a hard vaccine mandate are not willing to acknowledge that that's also literally an authoritarian policy, where you're saying do this or else. It's like, or else what? What are you going to fine them? What are you going to put them in prison? Like, what are you going to do? Make them lose their job? I'm uncomfortable with that hard vaccine mandate. I think that is not really balancing a left vision well and leftist ideals well, because what you're dealing with here is, it is a paradox, because as lefties, we care deeply about both the individual and the community and the collective. And so you have to try to strike a balance between the rights and the free choice of the individual, but also the concern for the collective. And the only way I can think to split the difference there is vaccine or test. So it's sort of the least bad option where we can satiate both proper and correct instincts, the instinct for individual choice and individual rights, but also for the well-being of the collective. So again, I love this. I think he absolutely nailed it. His position is exactly like my position. And in fact, he actually shifted me slightly, because previously I think I would have said, I'm actually okay with a hard vaccine mandate in high-risk fields like nursing homes or the healthcare system. But I mean, when he said, like, well, what are you going to do with these people if they don't get it? That sort of landed with me. And so I think that now my position is vaccine or test, and it's across the board. It's for everybody, even in the high-risk fields. And I also agree with his point on persuasion. Now, that's the thing. So either lefties have been for, to get back to the point I was trying to make before when I cut myself off, either I've seen lefties either for a hard vaccine mandate, but they won't acknowledge it's authoritarian, or they're against mandates, but then there's a lot of lefties who are like weirdly flirting with just anti-vax stupidity. Now, maybe they don't go as far as like it's a microchip or whatever, like the dumbest conspiracies, but there's plenty of like, let me pick out anecdotes about the vaccine being bad, or misrepresent a non-peer-reviewed study about the vaccine being bad, and then like raise skepticism about the vaccine while also simultaneously claiming, I'm not raising skepticism about the vaccine, I'm pro-vaccine. So it's weird. I don't think there are many on the left that I've seen, in my estimation, who are striking that proper balance, and Jeremy Corbyn is the first to really do that in the discourse, in my opinion, which is why I love this clip so much. Again, so I agreed with what Biden did, and I think it was wildly misrepresented by the media and by people on the left and by virtually everybody. And everybody was claiming it was a vaccine mandate. It was not a vaccine mandate. It was vaccine or test, and it's for businesses with 100 employees or more. I probably would have done it for just businesses, period, so all businesses. But that was a reasonable policy. Now, the Fifth Circuit Court did slap that down, but I told you guys, my prediction on that is when it goes to a higher court, it will either be upheld, so they'll allow the policy to go forward, the OSHA policy to go forward, or what they'll say is, look, we're going to strike it down, but it's not inherently unconstitutional. If Congress were to pass a law that says the same thing, then it would be allowed. So in other words, they're not just going to, because the Supreme Court has actually routinely sided with hard vaccine mandates, not even just the soft ones that I'm calling for, the choice, the vaccine or test thing that I'm calling for and that Biden was in favor of. So my guess is what the Fifth Circuit Court said will be overturned. But I don't know if it'll be, we're just going to allow it, or if it'll be, we're going to slap it down, but Congress can do the same thing and it would be okay. So I don't know which path, but I guarantee you it's going to be one of those two things. They're not just going to uphold it and say, you can't do it, full stop. There will be a path where you could still do it. Because again, we're going to get to a story later in this show about the Supreme Court making another decision on vaccine mandates, and it might surprise a lot of you. Because it's the exact thing that I was telling everybody about from the beginning. I mean, there's case law going back to 1905 where they were like, hard vaccine mandates are fine. So we got another case that's going to surprise you. But look, ultimately, I think Corbyn nails it here. The proper leftist position, in my estimation, balancing individual rights and choice with the collective well-being and the community well-being, is vaccinate or test, and simultaneously, yes, use the power of persuasion to try to get as many people as possible to get the vaccine. And this is an anti-authoritarian approach where you do as good as you possibly can for both the collective and the individual. And I just love that. So now the job is just, convince people based on the merits. And I think that is relatively easy. And it would be nice if there were people on the right who weren't wild anti-vaxxers and people on the left who weren't flirting with the anti-vax stuff. But I always come back to the same point, a couple points actually, which is that French study of over 20 million people where vaccines reduce severe illness, hospitalization, and death by 90%. That with study of over 20 million people, that is as concrete and solid as humanly possible, man. So it works, full stop. It works. And then the other point is, like I always say, even if you grant the anti-vaxxers everything in that VAERS program, which is like, here's the adverse side effects of the vaccine and you can report it. Even if you grant them everything in there, and to be clear, I don't, but even if you do grant them everything in there, you still should get the vaccine. Because the number of side effects, illness, death, problems associated with the vaccine, even under the worst possible scenario from the harshest anti-vaxxer, still is way less than the 800,000 U.S. deaths and over 5 million worldwide deaths. And at that point, it's just a matter of doing math. What are the benefits and what are the risks of taking the vaccine versus what are the benefits and what are the risks of just getting COVID? And when it's math, the beautiful thing about math is it's not open to subjective interpretation. It is what it is. And when you look at those numbers and crunch those numbers, it's not even fucking close. You get the vaccine. So anyway, there you have it. Credit to Jeremy Corbyn. And I hope more lefties take this exact same position.